So I guess, Sandy, I'll have you do your roll call just to confirm who's here, but we can at least see that we should have quorum.
All right. I know that Lolita Davis Carter is absent today, so we'll start with Cecily Harris.
I'm here.
Great. Todd Kemry. Todd, I see you, but maybe you haven't unmuted yourself. Are you with us?
There we go. I'm with you. Hi, everybody.
Good deal. Bob Moeller, did you make it on? I don't see him yet. I know he's trying to get connected. We'll move on to Jeremy Peichel.
Good afternoon. Jeremy's here.
Okay, and Rich, Nate Rich. He was maybe going to be a little bit late. Put a question mark there. Anthony Taylor, has he joined us yet? Don't see him. Rick Tyson.
Here.
Tony Russo.
And I'm here.
Okay, and I see Lene has joined us as well. Good afternoon. We're good to go.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that we'll start with approval of our agenda. As we've been doing, we can do this just by a consent. So we'll take a moment. Does anybody have anything you need to add or discuss on the agenda? Great, hearing none, our agenda sounds good, and we'll move to approval of minutes from the January 7th meeting. I'll take a motion from anyone who is there, which I believe was everybody, whenever you're ready.
This is Todd. I'll make the motion to accept.
Okay, we have a motion to accept as presented. Is there a second for that?
Rick, I'll second it.
Second from Rick. Thank you, Rick. Does anybody have discussion or corrections on those minutes? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed to a roll call vote on approval of the minutes as presented for January 7th. Sandy, go ahead with that.
Okay, I see a couple more have joined us, so we'll go through. Cecily Harris.
Aye.
Todd Kemry.
Aye.
Bob Moeller.
Well, I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I can't hear you. So.
Oh, I'll take that as an aye. Jeremy Peichel.
Aye.
Nate Rich.
Aye.
Anthony Taylor, has he come on yet?
Can you hear me? This is Bob.
Yes, we hear you, Bob.
Yeah, figure it out.
Anthony Taylor was a no. Rick Tyson.
Problem is here.
Aye.
Rick Tyson.
Aye.
And Tony Russo.
Aye.
All right, those minutes are carried.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I can see me pretty nicely.
That will bring us on to the public invitation portion of our meeting for people to address us on matters not on the agenda. I did not get anything for the regular public invitation. I did get an email about something that is on our agenda, which actually comes up next. So with that, we'll move on to that. This is for the Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan, our first business item. I'll take presentations first from Colin Kelly.
Excellent. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Council Member, and Commissioners. I am Colin Kelly, Planning Analyst, and I'm here to present the Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan on behalf of Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. I should note that Emma Pachuta and I believe Adam Arvidsson with Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board are here and may join us for questions and discussion at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. Above the Falls Regional Park is located near the center of the regional park system. The figure on the left is figure 1 in the staff report. Zooming in a bit, in the figures in the middle and on the right, the regional park surrounds and includes 2.75 miles, of the Mississippi River in Minneapolis and extends from the Plymouth Avenue Bridge on the south to the Camden Bridge on the north. These are figures 2 and 3 in the staff report. Above the Falls is one of a series of regional parks that encompass the Mississippi River, its banks, and adjacent lands throughout Minneapolis. To the north is North Mississippi Regional Park. To the south is Central Mississippi Riverfront, Mississippi Gorge, and Minnehaha Regional Parks. Like other regional parks along the river in Minneapolis, Above the Falls is made up of distinctly named park units, some connected by linear park features and trails. These existing park units form the foundation of the regional park and will benefit from the implementation of the master plan. A few of the existing parks and other locations that play a prominent role in the master plan have been called out in the figure on the right. Next slide, please. Community and partner engagement has been and will continue to be a key part of the Above the Falls planning process. The list of people and organizations on this slide are examples of who was engaged through the many different conversations and activities over many, many years. This is not an all-encompassing list, and this slide does not fully capture the hundreds of people engaged, the dozens of community events, or the many, many hours spent by the Above the Falls Citizen Advisory Committee or the Riverfront Technical Advisory Committee. It simply illustrates the many different types of people and organizations involved in the process, from adjacent neighborhoods all the way to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and many folks in between, like the Mississippi Riverfront Partnership, Juxtaposition Arts, and the Friends of the Mississippi River. Next slide, please. So what did participants say? People want to experience and access the river. Some of the ways that could be accomplished is through continuous and looping trails that make connections into neighborhoods, providing boat access and gathering places, and offering recreation activities for all ages. People also want to restore and improve the river to include natural and open spaces with restored habitat, native plantings and gardens, and clean water. And perhaps more than anything else, people want equitable development. That means equitable distribution of park access points and park development, and designing with and for a diverse population so that they are able to access the public health benefits of parks. In particular, participants were eager to see benefits to and for the residents of North and Northeast Minneapolis. Next slide, please. The Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan is rooted in equity, as the fundamental goal is to provide parks and access to the Mississippi River in an area of the city that currently lacks these opportunities. Areas around the park in North and Northeast Minneapolis have high poverty rates, a higher than average rate of negative health issues, and a high percentage of BIPOC and youth populations. The master plan and staff reports cite data from Hennepin County's Survey of the Health of All the Population and the Environment, or SHAPE survey, as it is often called. Adjacent neighborhoods like Near North, Hawthorne, McKinley, Camden, Marshall Terrace, Bottineau, and Sheridan struggle with disinvestment and lack of positive economic activity. This information is not new to many of you, but it bears repeating as investment in this part of the city and region has lagged most others, or quite frankly, been non-existent. Transforming the land from industrialized shoreland to ecologically rich, publicly owned parkland will improve the quality of life in an underserved urban area and have profound benefits for residents and visitors. Unfortunately, this will not happen overnight. Approval of this master plan will not create immediate positive change, but it represents movement in the right direction. The short-term goals are to support affordable and easily accessible opportunities for outdoor recreation where they will make an immediate positive impact. The long-term benefits are that the park will contribute to sustainable regional growth, support private investments, and foster a healthier environment beyond the park's physical boundaries. Next slide, please. The regional park surrounds and includes approximately 375 acres of the Mississippi River and its banks along a 2.7-mile stretch through North and Northeast Minneapolis, as mentioned. Approximately 64 acres, or about 45% of the 140 upland, that is non-water acres, are currently under Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board ownership. That means the majority of land within the park's administrative boundary is not yet owned by MPRB. However, MPRB is working toward an agreement with the City of Minneapolis to assume ownership of about 20 acres of Upper Harbor Terminal as parkland. In the figure on the right, you can see how the regional park boundary, indicated by the dashed red line, only includes a portion of the purple polygon labeled Upper Harbor Terminal. This is figure 4 in the staff report. Because the regional park is an urban infill park, acquisition of additional parkland will occur incrementally over time, depending on funding and as purchase and easement opportunities arise through MPRB's engagement with willing sellers. Next slide, please. In developing new park elements within the regional park, care will be taken to design facilities that meet or exceed requirements for the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. The regional park is intended to provide public access to the Mississippi River and enhance the habitat, structure, and function of the river and its environs. The plan calls for the construction of new parkways and trails, some of which will be integrated into the Minneapolis Grand Rounds. An extension of West River Parkway to the north will help to achieve that vision. Continued development of the East Bank Trail will also help to further the vision of a trail loop system that will offer many opportunities for making connections within the park, around the river, and to and from adjacent neighborhoods. In 2017, the most recent segment of the trail was constructed between Plymouth Avenue and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Rail Bridge. Approximately 2 of the total 6.3 miles of proposed multi-use trails currently exist. The park concept also proposes new park spaces and continued improvement to existing park spaces. In the continued improvement category, the development concept for Graco Park is to establish a riverfront recreation destination with a mix of attractions, including a pebble beach, park pavilion, water recreation outfitting, a lawn, strolling paths, and a nature walk across the length of Halls Island, accessed by pedestrian bridges across the newly created channel. Some of this work has been completed, but there is a lot of work remaining. The development concept for Sheridan Memorial Park includes a large public art installation and river overlook plaza, a nature-based play area, strolling paths, stormwater treatment measures, and shoreline habitat enhancements. A lot of this work has been completed. Most recently, the play area, which I must say my 8-year-old son was really excited about when we visited last month. In the new park spaces category is Upper Harbor Terminal, and that's where we'll focus some attention on the next slide. Next slide, please. The redevelopment of the 48-acre city-owned Upper Harbor Terminal offers a significant opportunity for both MPRB and the City of Minneapolis, not to mention all the residents of the region. The former barge terminal was closed in 2014. As mentioned, MPRB is working with the city to assume ownership of approximately 20 acres, 19.5 to be exact. The redevelopment vision includes the extension of West River Parkway, creation of linear green space and signature gathering places, and reshaping of shoreline and habitat enhancements. As the master plan notes, the extension of West River Parkway through the full length of the regional park will establish the public access spine for the West Bank's linear park, as well as adjacent redevelopment. Plans for private redevelopment are being reviewed and developed and generally include an outdoor music venue and a mix of development uses including residential, office, hospitality, and light industrial. I must say, after reviewing this master plan, I was compelled to visit the places described, and I was particularly interested in visiting Upper Harbor Terminal. However, with many no trespassing signs posted in the vicinity, my field assistant and I did not venture onto the site. Even so, I was stricken with the industrial nature of the space and its surroundings, and I applaud MPRB, the city of Minneapolis, and everyone involved for envisioning a future that looks far different than it does today. Next slide, please. One of the overarching themes of the master plan is its commitment to increasing access to the river and parkland for residents in North and Northeast Minneapolis. The master plan also includes a section on connected actions, which focus on spaces outside of the park boundary. Because the primary focus of any given master plan is what's proposed for inside the park boundary, the staff report does not go into any detail on these connected actions, but I wanted to reference them here in the context of access and transit. Many of these connected actions are long-term goals that will require extensive partnerships to plan, design, and implement. Two such connected actions are Riverway Streets and the Farview Park Extension. A proposed system of riverway streets is intended to lead residents and visitors to riverfront parks. Employing a common palette of streetscape elements would identify the streets leading to the river as a unified system. Especially important is the installation of signage designed to direct people to the riverfront. The long-term vision for the Farview Park extension is to cap Interstate 94 with a land bridge featuring urban agriculture and public open space between 26th Avenue North and 28th Avenue North. Recognizing that the land bridge concept would exist outside the regional park boundary and would require significant public investment, as well as extensive interagency partnership, the regional park plan does not include it as a priority. Still, it is an innovative idea that represents long-term, creative, out-of-the-box design thinking, and it envisions a future state that better connects North Minneapolis and the river, which is very consistent with the master plan. For now, local and regional residents can visit existing portions of the regional park via a number of Metro Transit routes, including numbers 7, 11, 14, 22, 30, and 32. Next slide, please. The plan estimates $168,201,200 in acquisition costs and $16 million in development costs. Taken together, the total cost estimate for acquisition and development is $184,201,200. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Because of the regional park's urban setting and the desire to transform the upper river from private land to public park, land assembly will be an ongoing effort. It is likely to take many years and possibly multiple decades to fully implement the vision contained in this master plan. I should note that the development cost estimates focus on Upper Harbor Terminal and Graco Park at this time. And lastly, as I always mention during this part of the presentation, approval of the master plan does not commit the council to any funding at this time. Next slide, please. The Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Planning Strategy 1 Master Plan requirements, as well as other council policies included in Thrive MSP 2040. Next slide, please. The proposed action before you then is that the Metropolitan Council, 1, approve Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan. 2, require Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, prior to initiating any new development of the regional park, to send preliminary plans to the Environmental Services Assistant Manager at the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Division. And 3, advise the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to implement the comments in the analysis for natural resources and transit. And with that, I will stand for any comments or questions you may have, and will remind you that MPRB staff are on hand as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Colin. What questions do commissioners have?
This is Bob. Am I coming through okay?
You have a bit of an echo, but we are hearing you.
Let me try to mute this.
Now you muted yourself entirely.
Okay. The Audubon note that we got today raised significant questions about migratory bird habitat. I think that's important. Can you address that, please?
Just a second before you start calling, for those who aren't aware, what he's referring to is we got an email just shortly before this meeting from a representative of the Audubon Society about this. And Sandy, you do have a copy. You were included on that email in terms of including in the minutes.
I do
Go
have
ahead,
it.
Paul.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Mueller, thank you for the question. I was able to take a look at the email as well and appreciate the interest in and passion for natural resources and birds in the Mississippi River Flyway. And I think while there are a number of good points made in that email, I also feel that this regional park master plan will be transforming a largely developed space to one that includes a lot more in the way of natural elements, reducing significant amounts of concrete, for example, and exchanging them for open space and grass and restored natural resources that will improve habitat. But I am simply a plan reviewer and would also like to offer MPRB staff an opportunity to speak to this issue as well.
Please.
Hello, this is Adam Arvidsson. Can everyone hear me okay?
I can hear you, Adam.
Yep, we can.
Great.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Chair Yaruso. I'll just, I appreciate what Colin Kelly had to say in response to the memo. And I also appreciate the comments that Audubon has raised with regard to the master planning effort. I do think they're correct that recognizing the Mississippi Flyway as a critical natural thread through our metro region is of utmost importance. As Colin mentioned, this corridor right now is a heavily industrialized waterfront with extremely limited natural habitat existing today. There are concrete plants and shingle plants and steel recyclers sitting behind hard armored revetments on the river. And our vision is to turn this portion of the Mississippi River into a habitat corridor itself. The shorelines will be restored. Much of this concrete, as Colin mentioned, will be removed. I think the master plan at its core is about renaturalizing a stretch of the Mississippi River that has been industrial for probably about 100 years, and having that have the look and feel of other portions of the Mississippi River, both in Minneapolis and beyond, that have benefited from that restoration over time, or from the fact that industry never settled there. This is a hard armored part of the city right now, and we're trying to turn it into green parkland.
Adam, thank you for that. I'm struck by two things. One is that in your comments about seeking public opinion, there was nothing in there reflecting a conversation with the Audubon Society. And secondly, your general direction and strategy makes good sense. And I would encourage you to include that in your documentation of this plan.
And thanks, Bob. And Adam, I have one follow-up for you. This is Tony. I'm not sure exactly what sort of staff expertise exists within each of these agencies. I recall a conversation several years ago when we were looking at something in Dakota County, essentially to the effect where, in addition to like total development and habitat things, there was an importance to specific layouts for some species. I think in that case we were talking about butterflies and how they'll not want to cross certain widths of things, and we were wondering about that with a trail and things like that. To what extent do we have that level of detail available in master plan review to know what sort of impact particular design decisions have on particular species of interest in this kind of thing versus just trying to take a kind of more general approach of having open space overall? Because I know one of the comments in this letter we have specifically about Halls Island and having the interconnection of there being habitat there, but also public use and questioning whether that's disruptive to certain birds. Do we know that kind of detail at this stage?
Chair Yaruso, thank you for the question. I'll jump in here again, I guess. Emma Pachuta is also on the call. She's a senior planner with the Park Board and may jump in for questions that are a little more detailed. But since we're at the master plan scale, I can continue on. I will say that at this scale of planning, we have not done detailed design work throughout the corridor to fully understand how we might ensure that there's a balance between recreational development and habitat enhancement. So it's hard at the master plan level to look at any particular site and understand exactly what the benefits or drawbacks might be. As we enter design detailing for various sites, as we are about to do actually for the next phase of Halls Island, that is the time when we do bring external design experts to the table. Obviously, the engineering experts come to the table, the landscape architects come to the table, but we often do have ecologists at the table as well. Similarly, we're already working to enhance the corridor with a habitat-specific view. In fact, if all things go well at this legislative session, we have an approved LCCMR project that would do shoreline restoration and reintroduction of native mussels to the upper river along the shoreline and islands that are currently owned or controlled by the Park Board. And in order to do that work, we're consulting with the DNR's mussel expert, Mike Davis, out of Lake City, and he'll be writing those habitat restoration plans and then managing the reintroduction of those mussels. And again, that's a project that's funded through the state of Minnesota, and one that we think, again, is really demonstrates the spirit of what we're trying to do with this portion of the city, which has been neglected so long in terms of both habitat and human access.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I think Emma might have been trying to jump in. Go ahead if you were.
Hi, yes, I was just gonna quickly jump in and just mention that, this plan specifically also is really a vision about acquiring, public and private land that we don't have. And so, really looking at each site kind of on a case-by-case basis really feels appropriate based on the fact that a lot of this land isn't ours currently. So we're not quite sure when we're going to acquire a lot of it. And I also know that Upper Harbor Terminal, similar to what Adam said about Halls Island, is also really taking a deep dive and thinking about the ecology of that site right now.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Cecily. I had some of the same concerns as the Minneapolis chapter of the Audubon Society. I'm actually a past executive director of an Audubon Society, Santa Clara Valley. And what I can tell you is there aren't a lot of studies about human impacts on birds off trails. There's some big studies on beaches on the East Coast, There's some trail studies around the San Francisco Bay. It would be really interesting to see some in the Mississippi Flyway. You know, what sort of activity flushes birds? Is it a bicycle zipping by on a trail? Is it somebody walking slowly by? Is it somebody stopping periodically with their binoculars looking at birds? You know, what is it that flushes the birds and for what extent? Would be really interesting to see. You know, I also felt that even though the long-term vision of the master plan is taking some heavily industrialized sites and transforming them to heavily developed recreational sites. So yeah, it is movement in the right direction, but is it enough? You know, is there enough, you know, natural resource redevelopment in this area as opposed to active recreation development? And I realize that this is a huge project. You know, it's, what is it, a 20-30 year vision in this master plan, 184 million in today's dollars. I know I'll be dead before it's implemented, but I hope that, you know, the park board has a chance to come up with some of the money to make this happen.
Thank you, Cecily. I know we have a comment from Linnea next.
Thanks, Chair. I would like to maybe ask a question along the lines of the last two comments, and from what I know of the engagement and community along the corridor. I also am curious about what we're seeing as demands on nature spaces in a COVID-19 context in many of our facilities. How, I know this is a master plan, so we're at a really high level. And so I'm wondering about two things. One, is there a way that at this point we can start to think and create plans for increasing the space to accommodate more people in this corridor and animals as well? And I know that there's also a lot of interest about not just having public parks in North Minneapolis, but public parks that bring unique amenities needed for the community. And I think an example of that is edible forests, and those benefit animals as well. And so I'm curious about what is the next steps with some of these ideas, and again, how is COVID influencing, for example, in the width of trails, the number of trails, the separation of users on trails, to prevent some of the conflicts that we're seeing in some of our facilities now due to just the huge demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Linnea.
Yes, thank you for those questions. I think you're raising some really great points. And as you mentioned, it's a little bit, I think we're a little higher level on this master plan, but I will say that working in the planning division, a lot of these questions are things that we're thinking about and we're asking critical questions about how this last year with COVID may impact use on park space now and then also in the future. I'm also working on another master plan that's currently underway, and that's something that we are really talking about. And I anticipate that we'll be taking these lessons learned as we kind of work through COVID and be implementing them into future projects as we learn more about how people's behaviors may have changed from this last year.
Chair, if I could, I think one of the things I'm looking to understand is, for example, we're not talking about the number of trails exactly or defining that today, but the amount of space designated for trails. Is there an opportunity to grow that larger than what it is currently, particularly in the Upper Harbor region of this project? And then I guess my other question is there the opportunity now in this master plan to articulate the value or placehold for creating natural habitat that facilitates and birds accessing what they need in that space, like an urban forest or habitat for migrating birds.
Thank you. I think so. Your first question is around like, can, you know, kind of our standard width for our trails be kind of looked at as widening, and you're thinking specifically with the Upper Harbor Terminal site? Like your
I don't know that we it's the standard width of trails, because we have trails that I think meet kind of what I'm thinking about is probably what's ideal, which is if I look at the Cedar Lake Trail corridor, and you have two-way traffic for bicycles separated, and then you have a really wide pedestrian trail that's separated from those two trails. And I'm just wondering about is where if it's possible to widen the amount of space in general that we are dedicating to trail and park space, so that we can do the most and have the flexibility to do the most to provide separation of use and enough space for people to socially distance from one another. And I'm just thinking, and I'm just, if that's something that we can talk about as a part of this, if that's too in the weeds. But I think there's maps in the plan, right, about the that we're going to use for trails, and with the typography, my guess is you can't do something like that, and the trails as identified now aren't like that. But to me, it seems like that would be, if we're going to be building trails right now, building them in that way seem to make sense. The second question is, can we put some kind of earmark or value statement or goal of providing habitat space as much as possible on this corridor for both things like edible forests and space for undeveloped space that's natural for migrating animals, birds to be.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. So I think I'm going to, Adam, invite you to kind of jump in here. I will say that for the Upper Harbor Terminal site, and I would imagine for other areas as well, we are limited with the kind of width of space that we're working with. And I know that that is a challenge over there. So as to kind of how the paths are laid out, I'd have to double check with the project manager to kind of get a little bit more clarity on that. But I do know that that is something, you know, that sometimes is out of our control. It's sort of like the width of space that we're working with, at least in that specific area. Adam, I don't know if you can speak a little bit about kind of adding. Thanks.
Yeah, I can certainly jump in. Thank you for your questions, Commissioner Atlas Engebretson. In terms of the trail width and the amount of kind of linear space that we have, a lot of that is going to depend on how much land we're able to acquire. So there may be situations where, similar to how the East Bank Trail runs now behind the Graco Corporation, we have a finite amount of land that we were able to acquire in an easement, and that does drive kind of the overall trail width that we can do. I think our ideal situation when we have space to do it is to do something more like what you referenced at the Cedar Lake Trail. But even around the chain of lakes, for instance, our most popular trails, we often even there don't have the space to do that. So we try to make those trails as wide as we can. I do need to caution, though, that, you know, on the sort of habitat flip side, you know, the more ribbons of pavement that we do put in and the wider those trails get, we also then potentially throw things out of balance the other way in terms of encroaching on shoreline restoration or on upland restoration. So I think those decisions are probably made during the detailed design phase of things, which admittedly may not happen for decades until we acquire enough land to be able to put a trail of any significant length that makes it cost effective to do it at once. I think this master plan really needs to be seen in a lot of ways as a vision for acquisition and then detailed design and development of that corridor. And I think to your specific question, we can certainly explore wider trail options when that time comes. Unfortunately, where we're sitting right now, we actually don't even have any land to build anything on. Everything we own so we have trails on it. And then in terms of your habitat question around the vision statement, and I admit to not, I had to join by phone today. I don't have the plan directly in front of me. But it is certainly my impression that sort of the continuous habitat that would link North Mississippi Regional Park to the north with the central Mississippi and the Gorge to the south, that habitat connectivity is a key goal and principle of the plan. And if that's not explicitly written, then it is something that we can probably update and strengthen. But I do know from my history with the project over the years that that's always been a key talking point to really, when you look at the Mississippi corridor through the Twin Cities, this is really the piece that is the least habitat oriented and the most industrial. And our goal with this plan is to connect those dots through this portion of Minneapolis, both for habitat purposes, but also for the recreation and wellness benefits for people living nearby.
Adam, this is Bob Mueller again. I really hear from you all a dedication to the enhancement of habitat and animals. But the plan, as I read it, was not very articulate in committing to those kind of goals. I think we should include some specific language to reflect a dedication toward ensuring these things happen.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Mueller, I just want to jump in. Colin Kelly here. Having read the memo or the email from the representative from the Audubon Society, I got the sense what she was looking for was an addition of a guiding principle, something like is seen in the executive summary of the master plan that includes a number of different statements. There's also a set of implementation principles as well. And this could have just been my read of that portion of the memo or email. But I think there was an interest in providing a guiding principle that spoke to this particular topic area. In my opinion, the master plan in total talks about this importance of re-greening, or Adam put it much better than I did, renaturalizing this area from its current state to one that is much more natural in orientation. And I saw that throughout this master plan. It might not currently exist in one of the guiding principles that sits on page E3, or the implementation principles that sits on the following page. But man, it is woven through this plan, in my opinion. And I'll pause there for any additional comments on that.
Colin, thanks for bringing that up. I did notice at the end of the third paragraph in the Audubon letter that they suggest a guiding principle, but I almost think it needs to go further than that. I don't see this plan as a re-greening or a renaturalizing. I see some intention to try to return some, some species back to the area. But again, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to restore part of the Mississippi River. And I don't think it's doing that.
We are probably morphing gradually here into more of the kind of discussion phase. So it might be nice to get some sort of motion on the floor if that's what we're going to do. If anyone wants to make such a thing. Just as a matter of procedure.
This is Bob. I will move that we recommend the recommendations of staff, and then we can talk about any modifications or additions.
Okay, so we have a motion for the staff recommendation. Is there a second for that? Okay, I'm not hearing a second for that. I'll ask one more time. Is anyone going to second that, or are we back to square one? I will mention that just administratively, we at this stage don't have a lot of actual powers for requiring modifications. We can essentially pass, we can recommend approval of this with some caveats that we pass along to the Community Development Committee to consider, or we can recommend denial with some concerns and have it go back to an agency to propose modifications coming back to us with some comments, but we can't just amend in our own actions. So we can approve or deny with comments, but that's pretty much all that's available to us.
Tony, can I ask you a question about the proposed action?
Sure. I don't know if I can answer it, but you can certainly ask.
Okay. Well, looking at the three bullet points there, I understand the first two. I'm not quite sure I understand the third one. And I just looked at the staff report again, you know, about what exactly that means for us to recommend. And then, is it appropriate for us to consider putting something in the proposed action about this guiding principle or recommendation that they, you know, involve some of the conservation groups or bird groups in the area as part of their specific planning as they move forward?
That's a possibility. In terms of general wording, that's an advise rather than require, so that potentially has flexibility. Colin, could you speak more to the specifics of what that entails on that line, item 3?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, the third proposed action, as has become a bit more commonplace in recent months, if not a little bit longer, is to encourage the review by our implementing agencies, the comments that come out of other council division review, and occasionally the review of other folks like Department of Natural Resources staff who look at our and review our Mississippi River corridor critical area content. So in this case, what that's referring to are comments that are made on page 26 and carrying over into page 27 of the business item or staff report. And they talk about the total maximum daily load or TMDL project that's been done in the area. It talks about encouraging additional stormwater management principles that incorporate the vision. It also talks about encouraging the implementing agency to develop partnerships with Native communities. And so that is the idea around that third proposed action. It also references transit. So as you look at the very end of the business item, page 27, there's comments about from Metro Transit that talk about one of the topic areas I mentioned in my presentation was the proposed system of riverway streets. And also the previous recommendation to talk more about bicycle rental locations, facilitating transit connections, improving wayfinding, and so on. It's an opportunity to continue to work and collaborate with Metro Transit.
Tony, I'd second the motion.
Thank you, Rick. That was a second to the motion, so that does give us now a motion on the floor that we can work with. That at the moment is these 3 items of proposed action from the staff report. So yeah, I guess to your question, Cecily, it sounds like we could potentially put some things in a similar fashion to the ways staff is suggesting some stuff. If there's suggestions MPOSC wants to make that won't necessarily actually be modifications to the plan, but can be recommendations as they approach those more detailed design and development phases, if we think that's appropriate. Discussion.
Rick, commenting on it, I think one thing we need to be aware of is that there's a controversy constantly about developing areas and being sensitive to the needs that exist, whether they be for human development or critters and birds, etc., which are significant and a reason for parks to exist. But that conflict is always an ongoing one in terms of the space you have to work with and the detail that you want to go into in terms of modifying the space to either accommodate the birds or the other creatures that we want to accommodate, or humans, because they are in conflict in many respects. And the more space you have, the greater your chances are to do what you want to do. But in this case, I think it's always going to be a trade-off that we need to be aware of, and it just doesn't. The situation isn't made for an absolute position one way or another. It's always going to be a program and evolution that's going to be in progress. And I just think it reflects a lot of the issues that we have in many of the park and rec situations that we are working with across the board.
That's true. Thank you, Rick. Anyone else?
Well, hi, this is Cecily again. I didn't hear from any of the other commissioners on whether they thought about another bullet in the proposed action related to the Mississippi Valley Flyway. You know, it's the most significant avian flyway in the country. And again, as I said before, I think this is a significant opportunity for the park board to step up and, you know, help with, you know, wildlife habitat. You know, birds stop, you know, twice a year in their migrations along the valley. And if there were places for them, you know, to forage and rest and, you know, take care of their needs during the migration, that would be great. So, you know, I would like something in the proposed action about the Mississippi Flyway and how the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board will consider it with their plans moving forward.
Do other commissioners have general thoughts on that?
Tyson again. I'd simply ask.
This is Bob again. I support that we ask the park board to reflect the commitment to developing flyway sensitive plans as they go forward.
Thank
And
you,
I'm
Bob.
okay with Cecily's more specific request.
And Rick, you were trying to say something there too?
My comment is more directed probably at Cecily in terms of, or towards Cecily.
I can barely hear you, Rick.
Okay. My question is, what other flyways exist in major urban areas like this? And I mean, if we were aware of them, it would be easier to sort of visualize what that would be and how it would impact what's
Okay,
being discussed.
the Pacific Flyway goes from Alaska down to the Tierra del Fuego. It, you know, goes past Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and so forth, down the western side of South America. So it does go through a lot of metropolitan areas.
Thank you. And the question I have is it similar to the urban situation where they go through you say they go through these cities? Are the urban situations similar to the situation we're dealing with here in Minneapolis, St. Paul?
Well, against the parts of the Pacific Flyway I'm familiar with, yes. You know, the birds during their migration route, you know, they stop to rest, they stop to eat, and they stop to drink. So they do stop at rivers, they stop at lakes, they stop at wetlands.
I'm familiar with that because we at one time lived in Utah. I'm very familiar with the kinds of flyways that exist, especially there. But my question is really more one of if you have limited space, because we have already talked about wanting to do more than perhaps possible. Does that space exist to the degree it could be used for a flyway here? I'm asking. I'm not saying, just asking.
It gets into the weeds a bit too, but it might be interesting to see if there's any plans for similar sorts of park space in any of those areas to see how they address it. I don't know what that would look like either.
Chair Russo, this is Emmett.
Yes.
I just wanted to comment that one of the review steps that we take is that we reach out to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources and their Mississippi River Critical Corridor staff and request their review of the proposed plan. And one of the elements that they're looking at is some of those it's a habitat assessment mostly, and the requirements in our policy plan are habitat level, sort of natural resource expectations, not species level. So that's just the difference I'm calling out. But that review was done, and the DNR did not raise concerns in that review of the Mississippi River corridor. Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification, Emmett. So I guess at this point, what I'll say is we have two avenues open to us. And one is that our council liaison, Linnea Atlas-Ingerbretson, can, of course, convey the gist of this discussion at the CDC level. Or if you want anything more specific than that, someone can make a motion with particular wording for an amendment if you want to craft such a thing. But otherwise, at this point, we have kind of some ideas. Certainly, the agency staff have heard those. If we feel the need to formalize it anymore, that would be another motion at this stage. Not hearing any so far. Is there someone who's merely trying to take the time to come up with wording that I should wait for? Or are we feeling okay and can wrap up our discussion?
Chair Russo, this is Colin Kelly here. I just wanted to make a point before we move on here. Just a piece of information that could be useful to consider for the commission and others on the line. You might recall back in the fall and early winter of 2019, we considered the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Mississippi Gorge Regional Park Master Plan. In that instance, the council moved forward two proposed actions that were very similar in nature to the first two proposed actions that we see before us today. In that plan, like you know, because of the similar context of the Mississippi River Valley and Gorge area, there was mention of the Mississippi River Flyway in that regional park master plan, as there is in this regional park master plan, but there was not an additional proposed action called out around that. It carried with the two proposed actions that are common that sit on the top two proposed actions in this case as well.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll proceed with a roll call vote on the motion, which was for the 3-item proposed action from the staff report. I'll have Sandy proceed with that roll call.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with Cecily Harris.
Abstain?
Emery.
Todd votes aye.
Bob Moeller.
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel.
Aye.
Nate Rich.
Aye.
Anthony Taylor, has he shown up yet? No? Rick Tyson?
Yes.
Wait, was that Anthony?
It was.
Yeah, yes, that was Anthony.
Okay, good. Good to have you aboard. Rick Tyson? Is Rick Tyson still with us? Maybe we lost him. I'm not seeing him on here anymore. And Tony Russo.
Aye.
Okay, one more call for Rick Tyson.
I can see him, Sandy.
Can you wave, Rick, if that's an aye? I see a thumbs up. Okay, we're going to go with that. All right, that motion carries. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So that passes. And that brings us on to our second business item, which is a acquisition master plan amendment for Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature in Three Rivers Park District, also presented by Colin. Go ahead with that, Colin.
All right. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, I can.
You're good.
Excellent. Hello again, Mr. Chair, Council Member, and Commissioners. For the record, once again, I am Colin Kelly, Planning Analyst, and I'm here to present the Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature Acquisition Master Plan Amendment on behalf of Three Rivers Park District. I should note that Ann Rexine and Kelly Grisman, and I believe Jonathan Vlaming as well, with Three Rivers Park District are here and may join us for questions and discussion at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. All right. All right. Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature is located in the western portion of the regional park system. The figure on the left is figure 1 in the staff report. Zooming in a bit in the figure in the middle, you'll note the special recreation feature is located just north of the Dakota Rail Regional Trail and south of Kingswood Special Recreation Feature in the city of Minnetrista. The Baker Carver Regional Trail is planned to traverse Gale Woods Farm generally from north to south. This is figure 2 in the staff report. Zooming in a bit further, in the figure on the right, we've got a map of the special recreation feature itself, with boundary expansion areas called out in magenta. This is figure 3 in the staff report. You may recall Three Rivers Park District submitted a proposal to adjust the special recreation features boundary during the 2019 and 2020 Regional Park System additions process. Through that process, the Council approved the addition to the Regional Park System. This proposed amendment is to update the master plan to account for the addition. Next slide, please. Unlike new or updated master plans or master plan amendments that focus on a refined development concept, for example, acquisition master plan amendments have different requirements as specified in the Regional Parks Policy Plan. Planning Strategy 1 of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan requires that acquisition master plans include a demonstration of the proposed unit's consistency with Siting and Acquisition Strategy 1 priorities, and boundary and acquisition costs to include a list of parcels to be acquired, the estimated total cost for their acquisition, and information on natural resources, site suitability, and other conditions that affect acquisition of the site or location of the boundaries. This slide focuses on the first of those requirements. First, a reminder of what the Siting and Acquisition Strategy 1 priorities states. On top of your slide, it says, lands with natural resource features, access to water, and/or restoration potential, will be a priority for the regional park system. The Acquisition Master Plan Amendment demonstrates Gale Woods Farm's consistency with this strategy. The special recreation feature and its boundary expansion are located to protect existing natural resources, and upon acquisition, the expanded areas will be restored to reflect the natural communities of the area. Furthermore, Gale Woods Farm protects the eastern shoreline of Whaletail Lake and encompasses Lake Flanagan in its entirety. A carry-in boat access and fishing pier are both available currently. I should note, the images included in this presentation are courtesy of Three Rivers Park District and are available on the Gale Woods Farm website for future viewing. Next slide, please. A little over 20 years ago, Three Rivers Park District received 410 acres of property as a gift from Alfred and Leona Gale. The property was conveyed to Three Rivers for the purpose of establishing, operating, and maintaining a public facility while preserving the farm character for park visitors. A master plan was first prepared in the year 2000, and the park officially opened in 2003. The official master plan boundaries have not changed since acceptance of the original land gift. As stated, the Acquisition Master Plan Amendment will formalize the addition of 31.2 acres to the official Gale Woods Farm Master Plan boundary. The 31.2 acres is currently owned by a combination of organizations and individuals, including the Boys and Girls Club, Jen Olson, and Three Rivers. The Jen Olson property, labeled with the letter C on Figure 3, is the largest of the properties included in this Acquisition Master Plan Amendment. It is 28 acres in size. The other parcels are much smaller and respectively 0.9, 0.1, 1.4, and 0.9 acres in size. The properties are located immediately adjacent to existing park boundaries, again, as shown in Figure 3 of the staff report. The boundary expansion allows for additional natural resource protection and consistent management of existing and new natural areas. Potential securing of associated Baker-Carver Regional Trail land, protection of existing parkland as one property, and more logical and straightforward boundaries, which are easier to manage and to convey to the public. Next slide, please. The Acquisition Master Plan Amendment estimates $585,000 in acquisition costs for the 28-acre Jen Olson property. There are no costs associated with the remaining 3.2 acres of Boys and Girls Club property and Three Rivers Park District property. Lastly, approval of this Acquisition Master Plan Amendment does not commit the Council to any funding at this time. Next slide, please. The Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature Acquisition Master Plan Amendment is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Planning Strategy 1, Master Plan requirements, as well as other Council policies included in Thrive MSP 2040. Next slide, please. The proposed action before you then is that the Metropolitan Council, 1, approve the Three Rivers Park District's Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature Acquisition Master Plan Amendment, and 2, approve the boundary adjustment adding 31.2 acres to Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature in the city of Minnetrista. And with that, I will stand for any comments or questions you might have, and will remind you that Three Rivers staff is on hand as well. Thank you.
All right. What questions do we have on that one? Or motions if there aren't any.
Okay, this is Cecily. I'll jump in.
Yes.
I think it's a great project. We haven't seen that many special recreation features in the last couple years. And it's really neat what Three Rivers is planning to do. The one thing that kind of concerned me, though, is the natural resources description was very vague. And it references that Three Rivers will follow their overall policy. I think there's a lot more description about the agriculture, the existing agriculture that's been done there and the potential for maintaining and improving the farm. And, I worry that, we'll lose that opportunity.
Can you point to specifically where you're looking at, Cecily?
As far as?
Is there a particular wording, or is this a more general thought?
Well, it's a more general thought.
Okay.
I'm just pulling up the staff report right now.
I will point out that this one is an acquisition master plan, which is different from the development master plans, especially in level of detail for that kind of thing.
Chair, fellow commissioners, would you like me to talk a little bit more just about Three Rivers natural resource in general and how we manage our natural areas within all of our parks? Which is what our policy would be and how we would then apply that to these parcels as well.
I'd certainly be fine with that. Cecily, do you have anything more specific you'd like Kelly to speak to?
I'm sure that would be fine. Again, natural resources was addressed in the staff report. So, even though this is for an acquisition, I think it's important that we balance the natural resource objectives in these projects with recreation and equity and everything else.
Commissioner Harris, fellow commissioners, I'll speak a little bit to the parcels that are part of the master plan amendment. The biggest one is the Jen Olson property, and it's 28 acres. It's currently undeveloped, and there's kind of a mixture of open fields as well as forested woodland area. And we would be maintaining that very similar to the parkland we already have that is similar in its natural resource composition and immediately adjacent to this. So that includes typically invasive species removal. If there's any oak wilt, we do oak wilt management. I don't think that's the case on this property or in that park at all. Oftentimes there are open space areas that over time we would like to do reforestation. And so in that case, our natural resource staff go out there, they look at the soils, they look at the adjacent plant communities, they come up with the right plant composition that would be most appropriate for that area. And probably in this location would be maple basswood, and they start the reforestation process. I think in this case, it's very much kind of leave it as is and focus our efforts on invasive species control. And that would be the same really for any acquisition that we take on at this point. We look at what does it make sense? Should it be prairie? Should it be woods? If it's prairie, what kind of prairie? If it's woods, what kind of woods? And then our forestry staff and our horticulture staff kind of put together specific management plans for those areas. And often they are more detailed than what would be provided in a master plan. If you have a specific question or concern, I'm happy to try to address it further.
Does that answer your question, Cecily?
Yeah, I, just want for the record that we need to make sure all of these projects balance the natural resources and recreation.
Okay, perfect.
Objectives.
Anybody else with questions, comments, or motions?
This is Anthony. I'll bring forward a motion to accept the staff recommendations.
Okay, do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Was that Bob? I think.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so our motion is the two items from the staff report that the Metropolitan Council approved Three Rivers Park District's Gale Woods Farm Special Recreational Feature Acquisition Master Plan Amendment and approve the boundary adjustment adding 31.2 acres to Gale Woods Farm Special Recreation Feature in the city of Minnetrista. Do we have discussion on that motion?
It's a great facility and a great addition to our system. I'm much in favor.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Anyone else? Okay, hearing no further discussion, we'll proceed with a vote on that motion as presented. I'll have Sandy do the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. We'll start with Cecily Harris.
Aye.
Todd Kemry.
This is Todd. I say aye.
Bob Moeller.
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel.
Aye.
Nathan Rich.
Aye.
Anthony Taylor.
Aye.
Rick Tyson. I'm not hearing Rick. Does anybody have eyes on Rick?
Yep, he's giving us another thumbs up.
All right, thank you. Tony Russo.
Aye.
All right, that motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So that is approved. That brings us to the end of our business items and to the reports section of our meeting. In terms of chair reports, I have a couple things to convey. We, as you'll recall, last month made the decision to extend the application period for new commissioners to try to get a few more applicants, and we definitely did. There were quite a few that came in the last month, actually, which is awesome. So thank you very much to everybody who applied, if anyone's listening. Those interviews will be set up. I think the review panel will probably go through those applications, and I don't know if they're actually going to do interviews for all of them or actually whittle it down a bit and reach out to some of those people for interviews this time around. So we'll see, but that'll happen in the next few weeks. At this point, we are hoping to seat those new commissioners at our March meeting. And with that, thank you also to Rick Tyson and Lolita Davis Carter, who are outgoing members of our commission. They've each had a little bit of service to us. Lolita's last year, and Rick quite a few years. I don't even know how many at this point now. I don't know if you were 2 terms or maybe even 3. But thank you very much for all of your input over that time frame. And then the last one, we'll be mentioning this also in March to get it ahead of our new commissioners, but we will be looking for some members of this commission to serve on the review committee for the equity grant program for this year. They'll have a mix of people on it, but up to 4 of them can be MPOSC commissioners. So start thinking about that, and you can let myself and Emmett know if you're interested in that, and we will mention it again next month as well. I think with that, I'll open up to any other commissioner reports.
Tony, this is Jeremy. I've got one thing.
Yes, Jeremy.
You can put me down for the equity committee as I promised last year.
Ah, perfect.
That is all.
Cool. Okay. Anyone else?
This is Todd.
Yes, Todd.
Tony, you can put me down also if we're going to go ahead and
Okay.
start picking names.
Is somebody on? Yeah, I'm sure Sandy's writing this down and passing it along to Emmett so that I don't actually have to keep track.
Well, I expressed interest last year, and I will express interest again this year.
Okay.
We need some gender equity.
That is true.
I just am laughing, Cecily, but I got it. I got Todd, I have Jeremy, I have Cecily.
Perfect. Thank you, Emmett. That way I don't have to go find a notebook. All right. And any other commissioner reports? Okay. Then I'll turn it over to Emmett for staff reports.
I just wanted to begin by thanking everyone for a good meeting today, good discussion. Tony, thank you for covering the MPOSC open seats. Stay tuned for the interview process, which will be sometime in early-ish February. We're already in early February, so early to mid, but that process is rolling forward. Thanks for the interest in the Equity Grant Program Review Committee. I got that. If we have more than we need, I'm just going to work with Tony and we'll figure out who will serve, being the chair's decision. Finally, I just wanted to give a really short update on the 2021 legislative session. We have been at the Capitol quite a bit these past few weeks. My director, Lisa Barajas, who's on this meeting today, has been principally leading our requests to the legislature. We've talked with the Legacy Committee in the Senate. We've talked with the Legacy Committee in the House. We are scheduled to talk to the Environment and Natural Resources Committee about our operation and maintenance funding for 22-23. And we're also included in the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources bill for some acquisition funding, which I can tell you we really need because we are completely out of acquisition funds at the current moment. So keep your fingers crossed. If you work with the legislature commissioners, please convey our support for the regional park system in inclusion in the LCCMR bill, as well as support for the 40-40-20 request for Parks and Trails Legacy and stable operation and maintenance funding. Call me if you need details. And finally, I'll just reiterate my thanks on behalf of the council to Lolita Davis Carter, who unfortunately wasn't able to continue for another term. She was interested in it, but got a leadership opportunity in her job. And then finally, big thanks to Rick Tyson, who has been with the commission since before I got to the council and has been a regular and committed commissioner. So thank you again, just to reiterate what Tony said earlier. That's it for the staff reports.
Tony,
thank you.
Can you hear me, Tony?
I can hear you, Rick. Yes, go ahead.
If I wouldn't have all the technical problems with my voice, it'd be easier. But I want to just thank all the staff I've worked with over the years, and there have been a number of staff who've moved on, so some of the newer ones I'm not that familiar with, but certainly I've enjoyed their professional work. Also to thank all of the other people that I've worked with that are currently here and in the past. It's been a pleasure. And Emmett, thank you for all the help and assistance you've provided. And thanks to everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks,
All right,
Rick.
thank you, Rick. All right, and with that, I believe we are set to adjourn. We'll see you next month.